All
All
right, so
right,
we
so
are
we are
live with
live with
our
our
MBC
MBC
webinar
webinar.
series with survivingbreastcancer.org. And when we started this webinar series, we made a commitment to all of you and internally that we would talk about the things that nobody else was talking about. And tonight is no different because literally we are going to be talking to Gabby, who, as you see on the screen here with her presentation, is the Death Talk series. And yes, it's hard to talk about these things. Yes, culturally, this is not something that's comfortable, but the more that we talk about end of life issues, the more that we talk about what we want to have happen in those moments, in those months or years leading up to the end of our lives on this plane, the less scary it is, right? The less stigma there is around it, the less um, really just the less scary it all is because I know that it's unknown and it's an experience that all of us will experience once unless those people have had those near death experiences and come back but we're going to experience this one thing, this transition one time, and so making it as comfortable and as pain free and as easy as possible is something that I think we can all aspire to. The idea of a quote unquote good death, whatever that means to people individually. So super happy to have Gabby here tonight, and we are having some sound things that we are working out in the background. So please bear with us as we go forward with the talk this evening. But Gabby, I would love for you to introduce yourself and give us a sense of what is it that brought you to this particular vocation and this particular topic. So if you'd be able to share that as soon as
As
Laura
Laura
unmutes you,
unmutes you,
there you
there
go.
you go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I feel honored and really inspired by you. I've been listening to all your webinars and podcast episodes, and it's a beautiful community to see you moving through something life-changing, but finding community is just really inspiring. So thank you so much. I am Brazilian. Now I live in Miami, Florida, and I was raised in a fundamentalist religion. The main core of this religion was saying that we are born sinners, none of this reality matters, and when we die, if we behave well, we may have a chance in paradise. Growing up in that environment and belief system created a lot of questions within me. I wanted to understand, why am I here then? And what is life worth for if all that I'm doing is waiting to maybe go to paradise once I'm dead? Um, Through a lot of studies, I found healing and found comfort. I wouldn't say I found answers, because I feel sometimes that the more we study, the more we find questions and answers, and it's just beautiful because it is expansion of the mind. And through those studies, I learned about being a birth doula. So I am also a birth doula. I learned about Tantra, which is it comes from India, but basically explains the word in a complete different way. Tantra says that we can only evolve as a human, as a soul, through experiences with our physical body. So our experiences are sacred and they should be honored. And that completely changed my mind, and I'm very grateful. Right after that, I learned about becoming a death doula, and I totally embraced it. And it's been a beautiful journey because, like you said, it is a subject that not a lot of people are comfortable talking about. I went to Hawaii to study about birth and death. And when I was studying about death, I realized that I know almost nothing about it. And that's how the Death Talk was born. Because I said, if I know nothing about this and I am so grateful to access this knowledge, I need to make the best that I can in life to help others to live a conscious life and a conscious death. Because people die the same way that they live. So once we live a conscious life, this moment of death can be enlightenment. This is just the way I see it.
That's
It's
beautiful.
beautiful.
Abby. I think I remember that the definition of doula is basically helper, like somebody who comes alongside. Is that the definition that you would give of a death doula, somebody who's coming alongside you as you're making this transition?
Yeah, so the doula is a non-medical person that is supporting people through rites of passage, such as birth and death. And you mentioned that it is the unknown. Birth and death are a portal into the unknown. And the doula's role is to provide, what I really love is to provide quality information, because I truly believe that fear is when we have something in the darkness. So through quality information, we can bring it to light. We can see that is perhaps not as scary as we think it is. I believe that birth and death, for example, are normal human experiences. We are all born, we all die, we don't know when. So what do we do with the life that's given? So the doula is here to provide quality information. Something that was groundbreaking for me when I was studying death in Hawaii was learning about home funeral. My family is middle class. One of the questions that I always had was like, can I afford to die?
It's
And
expensive. It
Expensive.
is
It's
expensive.
expensive.
it is expensive. And when you are going through that, it's a lot of stress. When someone leaves and the family has to make choices last minute, they want to make sure that you have the best experience. And when I learned, well, you can have a home funeral and that can be just as beautiful, perhaps even more profound. So the doula is here to teach you that home funeral is an option. A green burial nowadays, we are not just concerned with our life and death, but what is the planet that we are living for the next generations? What is our legacy? So the doula can teach you about your options, the importance of talking about last wishes. The doula also provides companionship. And I like to say there is a person called Ram Dass who used to do Dharma talks. And he always talked about holding space as a loving awareness. So when you look at a tree, you just love the tree. You don't try to change it. And it's the same with with our beloved ones. Holding space, companionship is just witnessing someone and the light that comes out of them without trying to fix, without taking away their power. So the doula is here to hold your hand and empower you through these transitions that can sometimes feel isolating because there's so much guilt and shame.
Yeah.
The doula is also holistically holding space for anything that's emotional, mental, physical, if you need physical help. And lastly, I like to say spiritual, not necessarily religious, because the doula is here to support you, non-judgmental help. So I can work with anyone from any walks of life, respecting where they're coming from. Maybe they want to have a religious experience or not. My role here is just to make sure that we honor your life and your wishes.
I love
I
that
love that
definition
definition.
of holding space. That's such a beautiful representation. I think it's hard to not want to fix, right? It's hard to not want to give advice or instruction and that sort of thing, but such magic occurs when someone just is just there with you. I love the metaphor of the tree. You're not trying to change the tree, you're just being there with the tree. I love that. So let's maybe turn to we've got a slide deck here. You've got some of the different offerings that you have specifically. So I'd love for you to talk through that next, if you would.
Absolutely. So if we can go to the next, yes. Um, but as I was sharing, the Deaf Talk was born from my wish to share all the wisdom that I gained. And my question was, how can we embrace the fact that death is coming? It doesn't matter where you come from, uh, how much money you have in your bank account, all the papers hanging on your wall. Sometimes death comes from the back, we have no control. Something that we used to say at my training is, hi, my name is Gabby, I'll die and I don't know when. Your name is Abigail, you die and I don't know when. So we bring it to light. And when I decided to create the talks, the intention was to have specific themes so we can go deeper into each theme, bring them to light. At the same time that I am talking, I invite whoever is participating to talk and share about their experiences. And usually I have a talking stick because we want to make sure that whoever is talking is just talking and everyone is just listening. And at the end, we say thank you. We don't give our own opinions because we respect the human who's in front of us. So I'll just quickly touch on each talk. The way we are born says a lot about how we live and die. Oftentimes, trauma starts at birth, starts during pregnancy. So it's never too late to address whatever happened in the past so we can live life more fully. I also teach about cycles because when we understand that everything in nature is cyclical, through life we experience many births, lives, and deaths and rebirths. I like to say that when you go to school and you graduate, that part of you is never coming back. When you start a relationship with a friend, with a partner, and for some reason you break up, that's another death. So I truly believe that we go through smaller deaths through life, and it's all preparing us to this final moment. It's all an opportunity to learn and grow. I also teach about options, as I mentioned, the greener ways of dying, conscious death. What does it mean to have a conscious death? We talk about why we should have less wishes later as soon as possible. Uh, because sometimes death comes from the back. We have no control. So when we don't have our last wishes letter, we leave it to our loved ones to try to scramble and figure out. Maybe they feel guilty. They don't know if they honor you. So having your letter, you can write it anytime, at any age. Talk about what is meaningful to you so we can honor you. Everyone would like to give you that gift. We also talk about grief because grief comes in waves. It's not a linear experience. I used to say that grief is if you drop a cup and it shatters on the ground, you may try to pick up the pieces and put it back together, but you always have that scar. It's the same with grief. We learn how to live with it, but society doesn't create a container for it, a safe container. There's a rush to go back to work, to be productive. It's really important to talk about grief. Like you said, Abigail, we'll be talking about things that not a lot of people like to talk. So I also plan on talking about suicide, specifically teenagers, mental health. That's an age where many of us go through questions and have to go through it alone. I talk about astral travel and dreams because a person who is 70 years old spends 30 of those years dreaming. Where do we go when we dream? So it's important to understand that the dream, when you wake up, you live, and then you go to sleep, you have a next opportunity to be born again tomorrow. Exercising gratitude every time we get to see the sun rising every day. It's a beautiful practice. I also work with indigenous tribes from Brazil, and plant medicine, which is very helpful at end of life care. Also, people can experience the so-called ego death, which is learning that our belongings, my ring, my earrings, my clothing, all of this is going to be gone one day. So learning to stay with what's essential and nurturing our relationships. Lastly, the last talk is about the afterlife, because the beliefs on the afterlife sometimes hold us back from living this life. So I would like to just bring awareness to all of those themes. I have done these talks in Miami in person through Zoom. I have also done talks at music festivals. I had a talk that was about sex and death and how those two experiences can be orgasmic if we learn to surrender and no expectations. And I have done this talk at a festival here in Miami and also in Asheville, North Carolina. So it's been an interesting ride, and I'm very grateful to be able to talk about these themes, connect with a lot of people, because birth, life, and death, to me, they are all connected when we embrace it with curiosity.
I love that. So on your deck here, the at the death talk, that's on Instagram. So would encourage everybody to follow Gabby there. But we've had a couple of comments that I think in some ways encapsulates what in the MBC community that we often experience. And one is just being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And there's a lot of that that happens because we are on medication for life and for as long as the medication keeps us alive. And so it's hard because we're feeling that drain on our energy. And then not just the energy, but then there was also another comment about just it's expensive. And you alluded to this a little bit, just the traditional ways in the US anyway of and I can just give my personal experience. My father-in-law passed away last year. And even though we had prepaid and made some arrangements in advance, it was a whole lot more expensive than we had expected. So it sounds to me, Gabby, like what you're saying, that a lot of these questions or a lot of this exploration of what happens is something that a death doula can really help with. But if you could maybe address just the financial toxicity of being really sick means that it's harder to access some of these services. And how do you work with clients in order to meet some of those concerns or those needs?
Beautiful. So the death talks, they are supposed to be for everyone. That's one of the principles that I really meditated, because like I shared, I do work with indigenous tribes. So it'd be very easy for me to talk to the shamanic folks. But my decision was to make it accessible for everyone, because we all die. We don't know when. We need to be educated as a community. And the reason why it is death talk is so we can create a dialogue between many of us who are going through life. So when I host the talks, the pricing is $22, because I would like it to be accessible. And if you're doing through Zoom, it's discounted, is 18. If someone is going through financial burden, always message me. I'm happy to accommodate. When I work with clients one-on-one, I offer either one session through Zoom or a package. And I usually offer grief support, grief rituals, because we talked about grief briefly, but now going a little bit about what it means to grieve and what you were describing to me. I'm sick of being sick. I'm sick of how expensive it is. There's so much going on here. And grief needs a place that we can put our feelings and emotions. I'm also a Reiki healer. And when we understand energy, we understand that energy wants to express itself. So if we keep grief or any other emotion, really, anger, sadness, fear, if we keep it in our body, it will manifest sometimes as a disease. What I learned is that society, we don't have room for grief when someone is gone from our life. We have a few hours and days to figure out all the logistics, and then you have to go back to work in 1 or 2 days. You have to be productive. So part of the grief ritual is, no, wait a minute. Let's look at what happened here. And I usually create a container, be it having pictures or flowers or chocolate. Tantra explains that we are alive through our senses. So using the smells, the touch, taste. When you create a grief ritual that is beautiful, you honor whatever it is that you're grieving that is not there anymore. It may be a relationship, it may be your old self before you receive the news that you have metastatic breast cancer now. You may grieve this. So it's really beautiful because it brings many possibilities. And I usually charge for my services for the one or for the package. And I could also travel to places. So if someone would like to connect with me, I can travel. We can do meetings through Zoom or in person. I believe that when we work with someone through end of life or birth, it's someone very specific. I don't believe it's a coincidence. So you can always go online and look for other death doulas. Even if you go on Google, there are many websites where you can find someone who you really resonate with, because it's a life-changing experience, and you can have a death doula for yourself and for your family, because sometimes your family is also moving through all these emotions. It can unite you.
That's a reminder too that just, it's not just the person going through the illness and the eventual loss of their life, that transition, but it's also all the people around them. And I mean, I have to tell you, I had a birth doula for my second birth, and that there's a bond there that is not really like any other bond when you go through such a transition or such a meaningful experience alongside somebody. It really changes that relationship in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you sharing that. Are we ready to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, so now I would like to touch on fear, because if we all die, why are we not talking about it? And something that I was meditating is that when we understand our body, we can understand a lot about our own reality. The nervous system cannot differentiate between real threat and the fear that's on your mind. When we have fear that's lingering for too long and creating anxiety, that causes a chronic response. And the nervous system nowadays, we talk a lot about fight or flight and shutdown. So we literally create chemical reactions. Cortisol levels go up, adrenaline. And as I said, when we talk, we bring it to light. You're like, wait a minute, there are other ways of doing this. It's not as scary as it seems. The Tibetans, for example, when they experience death of someone from their community, they do it in a complete different way. Instead of quickly removing the body, they sit with the body for about 3 days, and they are celebrating the life that was lived, and they are encouraging. If you believe in spiritual, if you believe in a soul, they encourage the soul to move on. They say, thank you so much for coming here. Now you are free to go. Please move on. When I learn about all these teachings, it makes me reflect that the way that we do it here is very different. But we don't really talk about it. So how will we know that there is something different if we don't talk about it? And I believe that talking also helps us to dissolve any sense of isolation, because sometimes you may think, I'm going through this alone, but as you start sharing, you learn that a lot of people are there for you, right? So I believe that it's an opportunity to connect when we talk and we learn to listen.
That's beautiful. And as you were talking, I'm thinking, obviously, pulling in kind of the concepts from, AA and NA, right? Those 12 steps of as people are recovering from these things that have power over them, the very first step is always to acknowledge that it's there, to identify and to say this is the reality of the situation. As you said, we're all going to go through this transition. So important to take some of that, the sting or the power away from something that can be really scary by doing this in community. Such an important thing. So thank you for sharing that. Are we ready to move on?
This is a reminder that we have forgotten what is normal. Birth and death are normal human experiences. As I mentioned, the Tibetans, they do it in a different way. I also talked about home funeral. Our ancestors used to give birth at home, used to die at home. Now, sometimes giving birth becomes a medical emergency when it shouldn't really be a medical emergency unless it really needs to be. And if I ask you, maybe I'll ask you now, Abigail, how would you like to die? Where do you see yourself? Where would you like to be?
So that's something that I've talked a lot about with my husband, because certainly from my own perspective, looking at myself, I would like to do that in my home, surrounded by my family and my things and my cat, and the things that make me feel comfortable. Um, but one of the real things that we have discussed is I have young kids, and would it be traumatic for them to experience that kind of in their space or in their home? And so it's an ongoing conversation with my husband and I, as far as what is really going to be the best thing for our entire family. But as a caveat to that, I would say that I think it also depends on if we're able to ensure that my death would be comfortable, right? And I know that there are hospice organizations that's their whole role is to keep people comfortable as they transition. But because it is such a it's a complicated thing, and so I think there's always that fear. Well, what if something happens that's scary? What if there's something that happens that is traumatizing for my kids? So it's an ongoing conversation, but my gut and my initial response is where I feel comfortable, where I'm at home, where I've got my things around me and my comfortable bed and my nest of pillows.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I love that you express your being mindful about your kids, because they are the next generation. We want to make sure that we live it in a better way for them. So thank you for being a great mother. And some people, for example, say they would like to die when they're sleeping. So it's just like, let's just skip this whole part. I'll just go to sleep. And what I try to explain is that death is similar to giving birth. So it's a whole process when you are near death. Usually, you have a few signals that death is coming, a few months prior, and then weeks, days and the day off, when the soul is detaching from the body. One of the normal parts of it is that the person will stop eating meat and solids, because what keeps us here is when we eat, it's the fuel to this body. So as we are preparing to detach, we stop eating. That is natural. And then it's up to you, for example, to discuss your last wishes and say, would I like to receive artificial nutrition? Would I like to respect what's happening with my body? That's why these conversations are so needed. Do you understand now? Because these moments will come, and then the person stops drinking water, and then they lose their digestive fire. They start losing sight. They start sleeping longer and spending longer in the dream world rather than here. And lastly, it's the last breath. So as you can tell, it's a whole process, and it's similar to birth. Now we have death. And although it's not a comfortable reality, it is a universal law, impermanence. It puts us in touch with having no control, and sometimes fear comes up. Dying shouldn't be painful. Dying should not be painful. Like you said, we have amazing ways to manage the pain that comes from the disease. I think this is important to mention.
Yes.
It's not the death that's hurting, it's the
Yeah.
disease. So we have amazing technology. I said I am a Reiki master, but I believe in integrative medicine. We can use energy healing, whatever is needed, so we can honor each person's process, because we are individuals. So there is not, I cannot say it's like making a cake. There's only one way to go through this.
Yeah.
But all of this to say is that even though a lot of people like to die in nature or at home with their families, many are dying in hospitals with 2 or 3 people. Some of the family cannot even come in the room. I work also with birth, and I'm about to go to Seattle next week for a birth. And I was asking the mom who can be in the room. She said apparently only 1 or 2 people. And there are so many who want to be there to celebrate this baby. And these experiences, they cause an impact not only on the baby but in the family. And it's the same on those who are leaving us. If you're in a hospital, you're not even allowed to be around your loved one. That creates some pain. So the more we normalize these conversations and reflect on other possibilities, we can create these possibilities, but we have to connect with it first, expand our mind to
Yeah.
many different possibilities.
I wanted to point out too that we've had a couple of comments about, I need to fill out my advance directives, right? So there are some legal documents that come into play when we're thinking about these end of life decisions, right? Or expressing our wishes in advance so that our loved ones know what we want to have happen. But I wanted to point out that typically advance directives will only cover things like when you don't want to have them, give you artificial fluids or nutrition, or you don't want to be on a respirator that's keeping you breathing. Those advanced directives are typically about the medical stuff. When you may not be able to communicate those things to your loved ones or to your medical team. But I wanted to point out that there are some other lovely resources. The first one that comes to mind is the 5 Wishes document, and that is something that anybody can download online. Also, somebody just talked about their POLST form, with that POLST. I always forget what the acronym stands for. Now, that is something that isn't available in all states. Some states have those, and they are instructions, say, to the paramedics, like if you have to call 911 or something like that. But the lovely thing I like about the 5 wishes is that it really looks more, I think, holistically, about all the things that, do you want music? Do you want incense? Do you want, all the different, your special fluffy blanket or like your special socks? I think it's really important to think very mindfully and carefully about those things. And a document like the 5 wishes or working with someone like Gabby can help remind you that it's not just about, am I getting a shot or am I getting an IV? It's also about how you want to surround yourself. What if those are people, if those are things, if that's your furry caregiver, your cat or your dog or your horse or whoever. It's important to think about those things too. So, Gabby, I saw that you grabbed something. Would you like to share a resource with us?
Absolutely. Thank you. So there's this great book, Beginner's Guide to the End. It's by BJ Miller, MD, and Shoshana Berger. I cannot recommend this enough. It's very easy to read, and it talks about anything that you can imagine. Lastly, there is this also I'm dead, now what? Important information about my belongings, business affairs, wishes. So you can write your social media passwords, you can write information about your financial bank accounts, any important piece of information that's going to help your family. Unless you even have a place for your wishes, I think this is great because if you don't know where to start, it gives you guidance. When you are not here anymore, who has your social media password, or what's going to happen to your journals, or anything really that's important to you? I think that the greatest purpose of doing something like this is creating peace of mind for yourself and for your loved ones. Because nobody wants to wonder what is it that you wished, or how can we figure out your passwords. If it's that easy, it can take us a few minutes or hours to write it on a paper.
That's such a great reminder. I talked about my father-in-law who passed away last year, and he was a medical doctor, and he literally, where his generation, where he was from Jamaica and all of that, but he had it in his mind that if we talked about these wishes, if we talked about what we were to do, that equaled it was going to happen in his mind. And so, I think a lot of people think that way, not necessarily in some of the older generations, but certainly that is a kind of prevailing thought process that if we talk about it, we're manifesting it, right? We're putting it out into the universe, then it's going to happen. At the same time, then as my husband and his 3 siblings were trying to figure out, what service he wanted, what he should wear, those really practical things, we didn't have his guidance for what he would have wanted. And I think that the way that I've looked at some of these discussions or some of these, providing some of this information in advance, that it is a way to show love, to show caring, to show compassion to those that who are left behind, so that they're not having to wonder and worry, did we do it right? Did we do the thing that our loved one would have wanted? If you provided that information, that can be really, really helpful. I know at least on Facebook, there is an option to establish a legacy contact. So if you forget to write the password down in a book like that, I have that book that you showed, Gabby, the I'm Dead Now What? I think it's a great book. The only thing that they could have done better is have little pockets so you could like put things in. I have to like staple things to the pages. But I think that legacy option, at least on Facebook, can be really helpful if you've forgotten to write your password down. And one thing that I see a lot of times that happens in our community is there's a husband, a child, a friend who then goes to all the different Facebook support groups that their loved one participated in, and posted and a lot of them will post very kind messages about how much their loved one was supported by the group and how much they got out of the connections with other people, that community. And I, you know, I have designated someone other than my husband to do that because he would not. But I do think it's important for people to have some of those jobs or tasks after someone has passed away. That way, those messages can be passed on to the people that are important to them.
Something important about this is choosing someone that you really trust that will follow through with your wishes. Because sometimes they won't. So it's really making sure that it's someone that who loves and respects you and will really follow through. And I think we can pass to the next slide now. But what was coming up for me as you shared about your experience with your father-in-law is this fear of bringing it to manifestation. If I talk at the suicide talk, I say talking about suicide is not suicidal, and talking about death is not creating death. Going back to energy, because when we understand that everything is energy, we don't only eat what we eat with our mouths. The conversations we have are nourishing or depleting. The friendships we have are nourishing or depleting. The music I'm listening to, is it nourishing or depleting? Being really mindful about my environment, because nowadays science already proves through epigenetics that we can awaken or turn off our genes through our environment, thoughts and feelings and emotions. So I believe that it's all about how we frame it. If I have a conversation about this to bring it to light, I may experience life more fully because I am more mindful about my environment, about my relationships. I am not wasting my vital energy, wasting mental energy thinking about something that is not bringing me life, that is not nourishing me. And thoughts, feelings, emotions, they shape our physical body, they shape a lot of what we experience. So investing time on having these nourishing conversations can be life-giving rather than manifesting death. Because when we dissolve fear, we get out of the fight or flight experience that we talked about, or shutting down. It's all about understanding that it can be spiritual energy, but science even proves it now through epigenetics that we can choose where to put our focus and have the conversations that are needed when we have life.
That's
That's
beautiful.
beautiful.
So we have probably another 10-ish minutes. So I know you have two more slides that you want to get through. So maybe let's go to the next one. Thanks.
Yeah, so this one is exactly on what I was talking, is the goal of the death talks and my purpose, if there is such thing as a purpose, because ultimately I believe our purpose is to try to be as happy as we can. I know we all go through hardships, but I like to remind myself to live life before we are dead. Not wait until our final minutes, final days to tell someone that we love them. If we talk to someone who is on their last days, they will probably talk about things that they didn't do and they wish they had done, and all the amazing experiences that they will cherish forever. We have multiple opportunities to live, and I understand that not every day is easy to get out of bed, but we always have a power to choose, and really have this as a reminder what I just said. Our environment really shapes us. So if you are in an environment or relationships that are not supporting you on your journey now, please make your powerful choice to choose yourself, to work on your self-worth, so you can live your life before you are dead. So there are no regrets. There are no rocks left unturned. And you can have an ecstatic death, an ecstatic life. But nobody can do this for us. So that brings us to self-accountability, is seeing life as the beautiful place that it is. And then we can go towards the last one. That was the last one. Um, when I was meditating about connecting with you all, what really came as a last thought is that even though grief is a unique experience, we do not have to go through it alone. So even though each one of you are going through is your unique experience, I am so honored to be here now. And I find it so beautiful to have community, because life is about how much we loved. All the accomplishments, the money on the bank account, nobody is going to remember that. They will remember the time that they baked a cake with you, or that you went on this amazing hike together, that you had an amazing time at the beach. Those are the memories we'll carry with ourselves, and that people have from us. So we don't have to go through this alone. If you are alone now, you know me. I know you are in this community, so I hope that you're not alone. But you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to be a loving awareness to each one of you. And I see you in all your strength. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabby. Really appreciate you highlighting these things for hopefully for everybody to consider. Grief is something we talk a lot about in our community, in the MBC community, and with SBC. So it is a part of the experience of living with a diagnosis that is serious. Um, and while I will never ever agree that cancer is a gift, I can't get there in my mind. But we have been given the gift of knowledge. We've been given the gift of knowing that our timeline is perhaps shorter than we would have hoped. And instead of having a situation where it is a traumatic or a sudden or unexpected situation, we do have that gift of foresight and have the opportunity, perhaps, to do some of these things to prepare ourselves for this transition, to prepare our families. And in watching my various grandparents pass away, as well as my father-in-law, the times that the various individuals worked to prepare, not just from a legal perspective, but also to prepare the family for what was happening by talking about their wishes, by talking about their experiences during their lives. Those are things that I treasure. And it was somewhat, not that the grieving process is ever easy, but it was easier for the family when the person who was transitioning put in some of this work ahead of time. So anyway, would just encourage everybody to consider that. There are a couple of different resources I would like to suggest to all of you as well. Jennifer O'Brien has been on this series previously. She wrote a book called The Hospice Doctor's Widow, and it was her artwork and her journal in the time that her husband was in hospice himself. He was a hospice doctor, and then he was in hospice himself. And so I recommend that to anybody who's starting to consider these conversations, especially if you have a loved one who is declining and you are a caregiver or you are present for some of those transitions that Gabby talked about as the body begins to stop working in the same way as it does the physical body. The same way as it works when we're more active and that sort of thing. So I recommend that book, and I think that it is really helpful. She also does a lot of speaking and has a great newsletter, so would definitely throw that out there as well. Kelly Grosslegs is somebody else, a grief therapist. who has worked quite a bit with the cancer community. And she can be found on Facebook as Conversations with Kelly. I cannot say that I have ever not really appreciated her posts as she talks about grief and she talks about the experiences within grief, as well as this context of having been diagnosed with something very, very serious. I hear that her second book is going to be coming out soon, but her first book is called A Comforted Heart. And it is just a beautiful, beautiful collection of stories and things that she's learned as a grief therapist. But that the new book's coming out soon, which I hear will also be just as excellent. So I just wanted to throw those other resources out there for everybody. And again, thank you so much, Gabby, for being here and talking through these things. I wanted to acknowledge also that some of what Gabby, as far as the spirituality, as far as some of this energy stuff, even the tantric traditions that she talked about, it can be a little out there or feel a little out there for some of us who are kind of grounded in reality, some of us who are, right brain, not left brain thinkers and all of that. So I realize that some of that can feel a little woo-woo. It can feel a little like it's not tangible. I can't put my hands on what we're talking about. But I've also learned through these 6 years that I've been living with metastatic breast cancer that there's so much that we can't explain. We are mind, body, and spirit as people. And yes, the tangible, the here and now, the body, the things that we can touch and feel, those are important. But it's also important to acknowledge that there's this unknown. Gabby talked about that so eloquently, that in the moments of birth and in the moments of death and the moments leading up to those transitions, there are things that we can't understand. People talk to people who have already passed on. People, talk about getting up and going on a journey as their bodies are breaking down. So there's something that's happening in the mind and in the spirit that we can't put our fingers on. That isn't so tangible and it's very subjective. And so, yes, this is a very stretching concept for me. I just want to acknowledge that because it's hard to wrap our heads around these things. But my encouragement to all of you is to be open to understanding that there is an unknown, that there's things that our doctors can't explain, that we can't explain. Quite frankly, a pastor or a priest couldn't explain either. And that's because this is just the unknown. And so embracing that idea, understanding that concept is there, can help a lot towards accepting that we can't have control. As much as I'm pretty high on the control scale, want to have control of these things, but there really is so much that's out of our control. And so having somebody like a death doula, having people like within hospice organizations who provide that spiritual support, who provide that come alongside you to help you see that this is more than just a physical experience, that there is a spiritual, there's mental and emotional, there's so many different aspects to this experience that we're all going to experience once. So just wanted to throw that out there because as Gabby is talking, and I love hearing her perspective, there are things that are just like, I don't know that I'm okay with that, because we're all experiencing something like this for the first time. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there as we close. Gabby, did you want to say something else? I'm sorry, I might have cut you off.
No worries. I just want to say two things that are coming up as we finish. The first one is in the energy healing is said that we have our physical body that we can touch clearly, but you cannot touch your thoughts, feelings, emotions. Right. So those are called subtle bodies. We have our astral body. That's why I mentioned the dreams, because when you are in the dreams, you're clearly not in this physical reality. We know that for sure. More than that, I don't have too many answers. I think we all come to the conclusions that resonate the most. I believe that there are many different ways to go through life, and there is not one right or wrong. But part of the healing is understanding that sometimes our thoughts, feelings, emotions, they get very cloudy. And we are distracted. So sometimes our body screams. It's like, now stop, pause, look at me. There's something going on here that you're not looking. And sometimes the opportunity to stop, pause, is the beginning of your healing. And it may be the healing of your physical body, of your spiritual body, of your emotions. It may be whatever it needs to be for each individual. But it's just, this is the energetic perspective. And like you said, it may be very different from what most are used to. When I heard it first time, I also didn't understand. I believe that sometimes we get in touch with the same information many ways through different sources until it makes sense. We need to first you acknowledge that something is different, and then you experience, you practice until you become. So even if you listen to this for the first time and it doesn't make sense, it's okay. Thank you for your attention. The last thought is that please, let's not be distracted with life. Life is full of distractions now. We have our phones. Everything is that. I won't go into a list here, but it may sound cliche and maybe even woo-woo, but all we have is truly now.
Yeah.
This hug, this kiss, this love, whatever whatever it is that we are doing, that's all that we know that we have.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I hope we all have a beautiful day, and I hope that we are not distracted to the gift that it is each and every moment here on this physical body. So thank you once again for having me here tonight.
Thank you.
I wish you all a beautiful life and a beautiful death, a conscious life, a conscious death. Sending so much love.
Thank you, Gabby. Yeah. Mindfulness is one